Scandal and controversy has been associated with every religion, but it seems like the tea just keeps spilling from the Vatican. The walls of this powerful city have kept a lot hidden from the world, but some stories still squirm their way out and wreak havoc around the globe. The Vatican City is an ecclesiastical state famous for being the seat of the Roman Catholic Church. It is an enclave inside Rome and is situated on the west bank of the Tiber River. If you look at the map of Rome, you'd be surprised there's a tiny little country within this extraordinary city. It's the home of the Holy See and also the world's smallest entirely independent nation-state. The Vatican covers only a meager area of 49 hectares, and its total population is 453 people. This formidable historic and spiritual city is as powerful as it is sacred. No one should underestimate the influence of the Vatican despite its incredibly small size and population. For a while now, the world has been suspecting that behind all the extravagance, power, and influence of this city, there's something sinister. The Vatican has been sitting on a treasure trove of dark secrets that are slowly starting to reveal themselves. There have been many unsettling incidents in the nation's past that need to be addressed. Today, we're going to tell you all about the terrifying secrets this splendid and prestigious nation is hiding, so make sure you stick around to the end. Number 1. Trial of the Dead. One of the strangest trials in human history was carried out in the Vatican. It is an incident that proved how eccentric and petty some religious figures can be. The trial is called Cadaver Synod. This was an ecclesiastical trial conducted by the Basilica of St. John Lateran, and the person who was tried was no ordinary man. It was Pope Formosus. In the year 897, Pope Stephen VI became Pope after Formosus proposed this trial. This was an uncertain period in the city's long and glorious history. A rapid succession of pontiffs occurred during this time. Just between 872 and 996, more than 20 popes were appointed. Pope Formosus had been accused of perjury, a legal accession to the papacy. He was also accused of ruling over 2 places at a time, but these accusations weren't made when he was the pope. In fact, these came nearly 7 months after his death. On orders of Pope Stephen VI, Formosus' body was exhumed from his tomb. It was brought to the papal courts and was propped up on a throne. Because the dead pope could not speak for himself, a deacon was appointed to do so for him. As expected, Formosus was deemed guilty. His body was stripped of its papal vestments, and 3 fingers of the right hand that Formosus used for blessings were cut off by Stephen himself. The acts and ordination by the dead pope were also invalidated. His body was then reburied in a graveyard for foreigners, but even that did not satisfy Stephen, who had the body dug up again and thrown into the Tiber River with weight tied to it. Many believed that this was just revenge served cold by Pope Stephen, who was unhappy with Formosus as he invited Arnulf of Carinthia to become emperor and betrayed Lambert of Spoleto. Some people later reported that the body of Pope Formosus washed up on the banks of the Tiber. The Roman population was not happy with this vengeful and downright petty trial, and they turned against Pope Stephen. Soon a public uprising erupted, and Stephen was imprisoned. Later in the year 897, he was strangled to death. Number 2. Exorcist Army. Science and psychology can say whatever they want. The Roman Catholic Church has a mind of its own. Most of us know exorcisms from horror movies like The Conjuring, but it was in fact a very common ritual performed during the Middle Ages. At that time, people were not aware of psychiatric diseases, nor did they understand the concept of mental well-being. But believe it or not, the tradition is still alive in this age of advanced neuroscience and psychology. The Catholic Church is an open and adamant supporter and practitioner of exorcisms even today. The former chief exorcist, Father Gabriel Amorth, passed away in 2016. It is reported that he alone performed around 130,000 exorcisms in his lifetime. Back in 2018, the BBC reported that the Vatican City welcomed about 250 priests to attend the annual exorcism school. The church actually thinks demonic possessions have markedly increased over the past few years, and Pope Francis himself advised people to seek out exorcists if they were suffering from spiritual disturbances. Some people think Pope Francis performs exorcisms too. Back in 2013, there was a rumor that he performed one in public on a man in a wheelchair. Exorcisms are considered sensationalized and abusive, but that doesn't stop the church from performing them. The popes have carried out many exorcisms in the previous decade. Father Amorth narrated an account of Pope John Paul II who attempted driving a demon out of a woman. She had been brought to him screaming like a maniac as drool came out of her mouth. The Pope wasn't successful in freeing her from the vile demon, so Father Amorth had to step in and finish the job. According to Amorth, he saw the woman walking up the wall as if gravity didn't exist. The Church truly doesn't care what the world or scientists think. They have carried out hundreds of thousands of exorcisms and plan to carry on with these in the future. Number 3. Secrets of Fatima. The sensational story about the 3 secrets of Fatima came to light back in 1917. These aren't secrets anymore as the entire world knows about them, but the Vatican still doesn't have much to say about these apocalyptic visions and prophecies. Of these, the 3rd secret has received significantly more attention by the Catholic masses. These secrets were actually prophecies blessed to 3 young Portuguese shepherds. It is reported that these were revealed by a Marian apparition who is now called Our Lady of Fatima. Lucia Santos and her cousins Jacinta and Francisco were the 3 young Portuguese shepherds who reported being visited by the Virgin Mary a total of 6 times between May and October 1917. Among them, Lucia was the one who revealed these secrets to everyone when the local bishop advised her to do so. People were not immediately convinced of these as there were no proof, but in October 1917, when the final apparition of Fatima occurred, the Virgin Mary performed a sun dance. This was witnessed by everyone present, including news reporters who wrote many articles about this strange event in the papers. The children were actually supposed to keep these prophecies a secret, but after almost 20 years, Lucia decided to write down the first 2 secrets. She still had doubts about revealing the 3rd one, but the bishop convinced her to do it. The first secret was somewhat like a vision of hell. Lucia wrote that all 3 children were blessed with a vision of hell by the Virgin Mary. They saw suffering souls and their condition was so pitiful that they had a hard time looking at them. The second secret was a vision, or more like a premonition, about the First World War. The children were shown how the war would end only to be followed by another war. The third secret is the most unsettling one, and it wasn't revealed with the first 2. In fact, Lucia wrote it down on a piece of paper and placed it inside a sealed envelope. She then instructed that this was not to be opened before 1960. The letter was opened up in 1960, but its contents were only seen by a selective audience and were kept hidden from the public until the year 2000. The third secret was a vision of the 1981 assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. The prophecy describes the bishop wearing a white dress as he makes his way towards a cross. He is seen struggling to get to it as corpses of many thousands of martyrs surround him. But after he reaches the cross installed on top of a mounting, he's killed by bullets and arrows. 2 angels standing under each arm of the cross were also described by Lucia. This, however, may not be the entire third secret, as many people believe that all of the contents of this letter from Lucia were not made public, and the Vatican is still keeping it a secret. Number 4. The Vatican and Nazis. Another one of the Vatican's dirty secrets is their involvement with the Nazis. It's no secret that the Vatican just silently stood and watched as Hitler and his Nazi army committed inhuman crimes and atrocities during the World Wars. They completely disregarded the persecution of Jews under the oppressive regime. But when the Second World War ended and the Nazis were defeated, the Vatican also provided thousands of war criminals and Nazi soldiers safe passages. These soldiers fled to South America through passages that are now called the Rat Lines. It wasn't an entirely organized system. Instead, it was a kind of collaboration in which multiple institutions took part in helping the Nazis flee and avoid accountability after the war was over. Thousands of Nazi soldiers fled Europe with the Catholic Church's help. Some notable names include Franz Stangl, the perpetrator of mass murder in concentration camps, Adolf Eichmann, Josef Mengele, Klaus Barbie, Walter Rauff, and more. A Harvard researcher named Gerald Steinecker wrote in his book that many Red Cross members had a soft corner for the Nazis and they provided them travel documents to escape. The Vatican aided many Nazi fugitives despite knowing the brutalities committed by them. The documents related to this Nazi-saving mission are still hidden in the Vatican archives. Researchers are, however, trying to gain access to these records. Number 5. Rwandan Tragedy. Back in 2017, Pope Francis made news by officially offering an apology to the victims of the infamous Rwandan genocide. Despite trying to suppress this secret, the Vatican was unable to avoid accountability for this. It It is a known fact that many members of the Catholic Church took part in ethnic cleansing of Rwanda in 1994. Instead of attempting to save the victimized Tutsi ethnic group, the priests, nuns, and other clergy members only made things worse for them. More than 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus were murdered by Hutu extremists between the April and June 1994. The Rwandan president triggered this violence. He was a Hutu, and when his plane was shot down, the national media and the Presidential Guard began the propaganda against the Tutsis. The citizens and the Interahamwe both killed the poor Tutsis. In fact, many Hutus were forced to kill their Tutsis friends and neighbors. Thousands of Tutsis sought refuge in churches but were killed by the assistance of the clergy members. In August 1994, around 5,000 people were murdered in the Netarama Catholic Church. Another priest named Father Athanas Saromba ordered his church to be bulldozed with 2,000 Tutsi refugees in sight. And Father Wenceslas Munyeshiaka was charged by the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda for drafting lists of Tutsi people for killing. Experts believe the church was partial to the long-ruling Hutus and supported them in the genocide. Number 6. Satan's Spellbook. Among the Vatican's hundreds of thousands of secret archives, there is a sinister and downright scary book that they don't want anyone to access. It is considered the most dangerous book of spells in human history. The name of this book is Le Grand Grimoire, and it was written around 1520. The author of this frightening book was an apocryphal figure named Honorius of Thebes. Many believe that this man was possessed by Satan. Le Grand Grimoire is written in biblical Hebrew or Aramaic. The book was discovered in the tomb of King Solomon back in 1750. According to legend, the Grand Grimoire is also called the Red Dragon. It is one of the most powerful occult books in the entire world. There are instructions on how to craft magical talismans, amulets, way to conjure spells that will make you win lotteries, and also many ways to communicate with spirits of the dead and demons. But the most terrifying spell in this historic book is the method to summon Lucifer himself. There are also instructions on how you can make a deal with him. There are many copies of this nefarious book out there, but experts think these are either fake or modified, so the spells in these don't work. However, believers think even these versions have some sort of power and influence. The original manuscript is, however, owned by the Catholic Church, and besides them, no one knows about its whereabouts. Number 7. VatiLeaks. Also called the Vatican Leaks, this scandal took the world by storm. It's almost like WikiLeaks, but for the greatest church in the world. Back in 2012, many documents exposing some terrible accounts of corruption in the Vatican were leaked to the public. It all started with a television show called The Untouchables. This was followed by a book titled His Holiness, The Secret Papers of Benedict XVI. It was written by Gianluigi Nuzzi, who exposed some pretty controversial and confidential information. These were memos and letters between Pope Benedict and his personal secretary. A lot was brought to light about the finances of the Pope and the bribes taken by the Vatican from people who wanted an audience with him. An extensive corruption scheme was also unraveled in letters from Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano. It was found that the Holy See had lost millions of dollars in inflated contract prices. These documents also exposed the power struggles in the Vatican. The city turned out to be a hotspot of envy, political scheming, and factional fighting. There was also a document that revealed that Cardinal Paolo Romeo predicted that the Pope would be dead within 12 hours. Besides the financial discrepancies and the professional enmity, these Vatican leaks also uncovered a scandal involving the homosexual clergy members. They were apparently being blackmailed by outsiders. The main reason why these leaked documents caused a frenzy was that the information in them was pretty accurate. Though Pope Benedict refuted these claims and called them exaggerated rumors, an urgent meeting of all the high officials of the Vatican was called, and after a few months of investigation, 2 Vatican aides were found guilty of leaking the information. One of them was Paolo Gabriele, the personal butler of Pope Benedict, while the other one, Claudio Schiaparelli, was a computer specialist at the Secretariat of State. The damage these 2 men caused to the reputation of the Vatican was monumental, but despite that, the Pope pardoned them. Number 8. Vatican obelisk was stolen. Who doesn't know about the giant obelisk standing erect in the center of St. Peter's Square? If you take a closer look at it, the obelisk looks exactly like the ones found in Egypt. Well, this one is also Egyptian, and it was stolen from Egypt by the ancient Romans. It is quite ironic that they displayed a stolen obelisk in the very center of the Vatican. This one is around 4,500 years old, which means it's 1,500 years older than the city of Rome. It's also called the Caligula's obelisk, as Caligula took it from Alexandria back in 37 AD. He wanted to place it in the Circus Caligula, also known as the Circus of Nero, where chariot races and many executions took place. This is where the first poor St. Peter was crucified upside down in 64 AD. The obelisk was later moved to its current location. It is the only obelisk that is still standing since the ancient Roman times. A lot isn't known about the obelisk. Experts don't even know which pharaoh ordered its construction, but many have stated that it's quite unsettling that a stolen relic has been made a signature monument in the city of Christianity. Number 9. Jesus was married. It's no secret that the world knows a lot about the death of Jesus, but there is hardly any information about his life. For a few decades now, there have been rumors that he lived his life like any ordinary man. There is allegedly textual evidence proving that Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene. This manuscript is from the 6th century. It was originally written in ancient Syriac but was translated into Greek. While the translation was underway, this story of Jesus Christ marrying Mary Magdalene was discovered, but this hasn't been mentioned in the Bible. There are detailed accounts of his birth and death in the Bible, but very little is known about the 30 years he was alive. The manuscript is called the Lost Gospel, and it portrays Jesus as a normal person who fell in love, married Mary Magdalene, and had children with her. This was not taken lightly by the church, as it's quite a controversial find. Many think that the manuscript isn't a reliable source. It is a real book from the British Library, but no one knows where it came from, when it was written, or who wrote it. The Lost Gospel also says that Mary Magdalene was the daughter of God and a co-redeemer of humanity. The manuscript emphasizes that she may have been equally important as Jesus, but that surely is an unacceptable insight for the Vatican. They have worked really hard to present Jesus as a white, powerful man after all. Number 10. The Secret Court. The Catholic justice system has a mind of its own. Certain crimes are deemed extremely bad by the Vatican, and to investigate these crimes, they have a special court. An elite squad of bishops tries the people accused of these heinous crimes. This panel is called the Apostolic Penitentiary, or the Tribunal of Conscience. It was founded by Pope Alexander III back in 1179, but until 2009, no one knew this court existed. The tribunal hears cases about sins that are so terrible that only the Pope can pardon the perpetrators. Regular priests can deal with crimes like genocide, so this means the crimes that go before the Pope must be even worse. Well, not necessarily. The crimes that can lead you to trial by the Apostolic Penitentiary include trying to assassinate the Pope, exposing the identity or the sin of someone who confessed, priests engaging in sexual activity, abortion, and more. Strangely, spitting out a communion wafer is also considered an act worthy of trial by this tribunal. The Pope acts as the head of this panel, and he is the only one who can grant absolution. The cases in this court are heard privately under fake credentials to protect the identity of the accused, and because the Church believes it is a matter of conscience. No one knows what kind of crimes or criminals have been before this tribunal, and whether they were punished or pardoned. Number 11. Transcripts from Knights of Templar. Among the secret documents held in the Vatican's archives, there's a yellowed parchment with a neat black script that bears answers to many questions asked by historians. It is the official court document that reveals the details of the infamous 14th century trials of the Knights Templar on the suspicions of heresy. This order of Christian warriors traces its beginnings to the Latin kingdom of Jerusalem, when 9 knights were given the task of protecting pilgrims on the roads of Jerusalem under the auspices of King Baldwin II and the Patriarch Warmond. This order of warriors was persecuted by King Philip IV of France, who was suspicious of their growing wealth and influence. Pope Clement was the one to initiate an investigation and sent many knights to trial. Some were eventually pardoned by the Pope. The full name of the order was Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon. The knights had become an elite fighting force in the Crusades and were known for their propensity not to retreat or surrender. It was their rules of secrecy, their privilege, power, and wealth that led the king to accuse them. This eventually led to their destruction. The Templar leader, Master Jacques de Molay, was arrested on charges of heresy in 1307. In France, many of these knights, along with their leader, were burned at the stake, while others were sentenced to perpetual imprisonment. Similar trials were held in many different places after France, including England, Scotland, Ireland, Germany, Spain, and Cyprus, but their outcomes were a little less horrifying. Number 12. Child abuse. The Catholic Church has been bombarded with thousands of sexual abuse allegations in the past few years. From towns in the Australian countryside to schools in Ireland and multiple cities in America and Canada, allegations of heinous crimes have been pooling in against the clergy members. The allegations first surfaced in the USA back in the 1980s, but the worst cases were reported from Ireland and Austria in the 1990s. Back then, the Church had no policy to protect and ensure the well-being of children. No one was even required to report crimes against children to the Church. The leaders have been issuing apologies for years now. The Boston Globe, a newspaper from the USA, exposed the child abuse and urged victims to speak up. Between 2000 and 2010, the US diocese had to make numerous settlements with abuse victims. In 1995, the Archbishop of Vienna had to step down because of these allegations. The newspaper also revealed that instead of holding the accused perpetrators accountable, the Church began moving them around. A Church Commission report issued in 2004 revealed that at least 4,000 priests had been accused of sexual misconduct in the past 50 years. They had abused tens of thousands of victims, most of whom were young boys. Pope Francis promised in 2019 that the abusers would receive due punishment. He even held an unprecedented summit on pedophilia in the Church and changed the laws to criminalize sexual abuse, but that doesn't mean the cover-ups have stopped. A recent inquiry has revealed that about 216,000 children in France have suffered abuse at the hands of clergy members since the 1950s. Most people think the Vatican's stance against abuse of children is merely a stance, and the Sacred City has failed to take any solid action against the criminal clergy members. Number 13. Aliens. Back in the 17th century, some documents from the Vatican Library were closed to outsiders under the order of Pope Paul V. It wasn't until 1881 that researchers gained access to these again. Among all the speculations, there was a faint rumor that these documents might hold evidence of extraterrestrial life and its interaction with the Church. Genrikh Ludwig, a Russian professor, allegedly gained access to these archives. These documents contain nearly 12 centuries worth of Europe's history. While he was checking these out, he came across some things that looked fishy. There were papers describing aliens and how they had influenced and interacted with ancient civilizations. The papers revealed that almost all civilizations have had their fair share of contact with extraterrestrials, especially the Egyptians and Mayans. Genrikh also claimed that he found records of incredibly powerful weapons that were used by ancient people. One text supposedly revealed that the walls of Babylon were melted using a weapon that emanated unbelievable amounts of heat and energy, almost like the modern nuclear bomb. While these are just claims and Genrikh never managed to provide any evidence, it is exciting to assume that our ancestors may have been in contact with aliens. The Vatican, however, will never reveal whether there actually are such records or not. Number 14. Pope Joan. The stories of a female pope have been around for a while now, but no one can say for sure whether these are accurate or not. Pope Joan was a woman who allegedly ruled the Vatican as pope for a few years during the Middle Ages. She became famous back in the 13th century when her tales spread through the continent. For centuries, this was believed to be true, but the scholars now think this was a fake story. Pope Joan has been described as an incredibly talented woman who entered the church by disguising herself as a man. Because she was smart, Pope Joan rose among the ranks quite rapidly and was soon declared pope. No one knew she was a woman until one day she ended up in labor during a procession. She reportedly died after the delivery. So far, historians don't know whether she was killed or just died from natural causes. The church processions began avoiding the spot where she gave birth, and eventually the Vatican removed her from the official list of popes. They also established a ritual to ensure that whoever became pope in the future was definitely male. According to Martin of Opava, her real name was John Anglicus of Mainz, and she actually entered the church because of her lover. But the 16th century Catholic and Protestant writers think she was just a fictional character. Number 15. Chronovisor. The chronovisor is supposedly a device that gives its user the ability to see through time. Between the 1960s and 1990, Father Pellegrino Anetti claims that he assisted the invention of a sort of time machine called the chronovisor. He reportedly used it to look back in time and see the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. The existence of this time machine hasn't been proven so far, but back in 2002, a book written by priest Father Francois Brunet revealed quite a lot about this. According to the book, Father Pellegrino Annetti was a Benedictine monk, and he allegedly kept the device secret until the early 1960s. During the 60s, he confided in Brunet and told him how 12 scientists, including Enrico Fermi and Werner von Braun, who was also a former Nazi, helped build this game-changing machine. It is said to be made of cathode rays, antennae, and metals that receive sound and light on almost all wavelengths. The chronovisor allowed the team of scientists to document events from the past. They believed that this machine could help them validate the teachings of the Bible. Bruno wrote that Annetti told him the device had several antennae, 3 of which were made of mysterious metals. There was also a direction finder that tuned into the era one wanted to see. A screen showed the desired event while a recording device recorded the footage. It was more of a window into the past instead of a typical time machine. Annetti recounted that he witnessed Marcus Tullius Cicero's speech at the Roman Senate in 63 BC. Besides that, he also saw the founding of the Roman Empire, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, along with many other biblical events. Until he died, Annetti maintained his stance on the existence of the chronovisor and that it had been hidden away in the Vatican for safeguarding. The people who brought this device to light are long dead, but the mystery around it still persists as the Vatican is still quite tight-lipped on the matter and there hasn't been any solid evidence supporting these claims. Could the chronovisor be real? But if it is, then why is it being kept a secret? Tell us what you think in the comments below.